please welcome Ryan Duggan.
Thank you. I'm going to hold this if that's all right. Thank you, Brad, so much for putting this together, and thank you all for coming out. This is great. This is a good size of people that I want to be talking to. Not too much, not just one person, so this is great. If any of you had a chance to come to the other series, it's weird to promote the series at the end of it, but these were all great, and they are on YouTube now, so if you didn't see any of them, you should definitely watch them. I did, and it set a very high bar. Ben is here tonight. Thank you for coming. But yeah, it's a cool series, and I think the group you chose was good. It was very different and sort of covered a lot of ground in terms of Chicago. So, we'll start here in what I believe is somewhere around 1989, but possibly earlier. So yeah, I had some pretty cool crew neck sweatshirts for a minute there. I had a RoboCop and I had a Ninja Turtles. I grew up in Illinois, in northern Illinois, almost to Wisconsin. We were like 10 minutes from Wisconsin. So that was Johnsburg, Illinois. To anybody who likes Tom Waits, is a song he wrote. His wife grew up there too, and that's the only thing that's ever happened in Johnsburg. I grew up there with my sister Rachel, who's also an artist, and my parents, Mary and Tom, and they were very supportive of art growing up. My dad always drew, and I used to do these weird comics and stuff as a kid. I was always giving myself, I'm realizing I wrote notes for this that I left at home. It's fine, I'm going to do it by memory. I was always giving myself projects, like weird projects for no reason. Like I made hundreds of these comics about this ninja. These were called Silence of the Ninja, which is an oddly erotic title. It's a very weird title. But I made these comics like incessantly, and I would always give myself these projects. And putting this presentation together and thinking about turning points, this is something that I've done my whole life, and I think I'm just realizing it now. But I would make these comics, and I made them at weird size. Like I chose to make them a weird size, where I would take a letter-sized piece of paper and then cut like another, not a full half, but another piece, and so they were like a weird squarish shape. And then, which meant that I couldn't photocopy them. But my dad was a roofer, and he worked in the winter when you couldn't roof. He worked as a newspaper delivery guy, so he knew these guys at the newspaper printing place, and they would scan in my stuff and readjust it for me so I could make photocopies of them, which was so nice. And I always wonder who the guy was that my dad was like, hey, can you shrink these down in whatever Photoshop or Quark that you were using in that year? But I don't know if this was later or before, but there's color. These are, they're very weird. You can see cops, like, this was like about two crows who were ninjas, or one was a cardinal and the crow, I don't know. Sears Tower, clearly. But I was always making these things, and I don't know why. I don't know how many people I even showed this stuff to, but I do remember in middle school that we had a show and tell, and I brought this stuff in to show my class, and I still remember there was one kid in my class who would not believe that I drew it, which is so funny in hindsight. He was like, yeah, right, your dad drew that. Like, your dad drew that, you didn't draw that. And like, to think of a kid being like, hey, Dad, could you please draw this for me? And this is what comes of it. So I think that was maybe the first time I realized I was a little better at something than people around me. And so drawing was always something I really loved doing. I would find any excuse I could to do it. Oh, this doesn't have to do with drawing, but I did have Metallica Ride the Lightning on cassette very early in life. Okay, this is from high school. We're going to fast forward. So regular childhood, whatever, school is fine. I wasn't popular, but it was fine. And high school comes along, and I have a group of friends, and we start making movies again, for no real reason, I just felt compelled to make these things. So we would make a movie, and then I would make this weird thing for it and photocopy it like a clamshell VHS cover. So I would make these and slip them into the cover, and we would, these were so stupid. We would make these movies up as we went along for the most part. I don't even know. This one is just one that I found that I still had that I thought was really funny, because this I cut out of he looks so high. I cut this out of a toy gun package that I got at at probably the Dollar General. But we would make these movies. This movie was about, I think we were holding up a Dollar General, but then it all fell apart like Reservoir Dogs. And most of the movies filmed in my friend Joe Torres's van, where we're driving and pretending to elude the police. It was awful. I'm sure it's totally unwatchable. I haven't revisited it in a long time. But we would make these movies, and I would make covers for them. And we called it Muñez Productions because I went on a trip with one of these guys, and there was a thing called Video Muñez that we passed that was really funny looking, and that was the whole thing. But we would make these, and then I would make a cover, and I would photocopy it, and we would sell these in high school. And we would sell all of them. And so I would spend hours at home dubbing these between two VCRs, and then we'd go, and people would buy them just because it was like stupid people they knew from school that were making these nonsensical videos. And that was like the beginning of, I guess, making multiples and selling them to people for less money than I should. But I wanted to include this because these guys were really funny, and like I think about them a lot because we made comics too in high school, and we did all kinds of stuff like that. And like, I think some of these people were funnier and maybe even better at drawing than me. And it's funny to think like that I was the one who ended up just keep coming back to it and then doing it. But yeah, these things were funny. It was like it was it was something to do in high school when you didn't drink, didn't smoke weed, and didn't know any girls. So like this was how I passed the time. College. I went to Columbia College, which is apparently very common in this series. I went for advertising copywriting. So like many people, I went to college for something I don't do now. It was a weird instance of I know a lot of people, their parents are always on them like, you can go to art school, but pick something that you can make a career out of. And I had the complete opposite, where my parents were like, just do something that makes you happy. And I was like, well, I should really do something where I can get a career and like set everything up. And like, so this is a theme that I picked out that is common throughout my life, where I'm always like seeking out some sort of normalcy or safety, and then backing away from it in the other direction, and then finding it again. And yeah, so this was that, where I was like, I'm interested in this stuff. I like music. I was playing in bands and making terrible art, but I was like, I'm going to go to school for advertising. That's what I need to do. I can make money that way, and I'll have like a safe income that way. So that's what I went to school for. One of the things I still remember from it, maybe the only thing I remember from my education in that, was that a teacher once told me, whatever you do, we were talking about print ads, which were a big thing at that point, and they were saying, whatever you do, don't present the ad as like headline, image, tagline. Don't do that, because that's the way your brain knows it's an ad. Everyone will know it's an ad. And that's the only thing I remember from school, because I use that making posters now to make sure people know it's an ad. I realized that the one thing they told me not to do is what I do all the time now. Band, image, where's the show? Like this, I used that the complete opposite way they wanted me to. But I went to school for advertising copywriting. I didn't hate it, but over time I realized I didn't want to work at an ad agency. No offense to anybody in here who works at ad agencies, it didn't seem like a good fit. So I got a job in school at the newspaper, the Columbia Chronicle, and I got a job there actually doing editorial cartoons for them, which was a really cool, weird thing to get to do for a year. And then the next year, I worked as a designer there. And that's sort of set me on a path to do publication design. So, I forgot. Let me back up. In college, I was in a band that went on tour, and this was another instance of like, I was in this band, these guys I went to high school with, nobody knew who we were. We didn't have an album out, but I thought this would be a great time to go on a 2-week tour to the West Coast with no money. And so we did, and it was terrible. We made almost no money. We almost got the van was almost crushed by a semi that the semi driver forgot to set the parking brake on in a parking lot. This is Jeff Goulet, who was in the band, and he's cooking ramen noodles on a Coleman stove in a parking lot of a casino in Nevada where we slept. So this was a this was a good experience of trying a thing and going way out and living in a van for 2 weeks and very much appreciating not living in a van for my life, which is the next slide. It was really cool to go out and to see, and it was terrible at the time, awful, but as many of you maybe agree, sometimes the worst memories are the funniest memories later, or the worst current times are the funniest later on. To think about all the stuff that we did on this stupid tour that was totally like worthless, and we played terrible shows, and the van broke down in Texas, and we had to live in a gas station for 2 days in Pecos, Texas, where they invented the rodeo. And so we got home, whatever that was. I finished college. I decided that graphic design was a thing that made more sense to me than that. So after college, I worked I got a job at another publication, like a free monthly that was called Conscious Choice. It was like a hippie magazine. And so I would place all the ads for the yoga and whatever stuff. So yeah, so I worked at that publication for a while, and like and then in this period of time, again, I started to arc toward normalcy. Like I'd done that tour, crazy tour. I had got back from that, thought this is not maybe for me, and then I was dating a girl, and we were living together in Lakeview, and I had this job at this magazine, and everything was like very much on a path toward just normal. Okay, college is done. We're gonna just have whatever life, and I sort of it started to pick at me like, okay, I'm sort of missing all of the interesting parts. Like the stuff that I like has no place in my life anymore. So then, out of normalcy, then we go back the other way, and I break up that relationship, move to Logan Square, and then in 1 year, me and 3 other people rent a storefront, and that's where I met Brad. So there were 4 of us living in this storefront. We had a room in the front. It was like a medical storefront at some point because there were all these plumbing hookups in the walls. It was very weird. But we found this. It was cheap because it was the year 2006. And in the Congress Theater building, if anybody knows where that is, on Milwaukee. If anybody has any questions, obviously interject. So we moved into this place. There were 3 small offices that would become bedrooms, and they had no windows. There were these big windows in the front, and that was it. And we had a huge basement, and I thought, I'll live in the basement, because that seems fine. I'm 22 or whatever I was, 23. So that's the plan. The day we moved in, there was a crazy rainstorm, and the basement flooded a full 1.5 feet with water. Thankfully, I hadn't moved any of my stuff down there yet, so that became not a thing anymore. So my dad helped me build a tiny sliver of a room in the art gallery that looked like a closet, but that's where I lived. So, because I wanted to take away as little space from the art gallery as I could. The other thing was we had shows in the basement when there wasn't a 1.5 feet of water in it. So this was the first show we ever had, which was Matt and Kim, which ended up being very popular. But this was our weird basement, and yeah, so like the first week or two of moving in, they happened to be in town playing another show, and we were like, hey, you want to play our basement? We just moved in this weird storefront. So we had this crazy show with a ton of people, and that sort of set the speed for what we were going to do with the space. So it was this big upstairs where there were a bunch of little bedrooms. The front was an art gallery that nobody else had interest in but me, which is awesome. Like the other roommates didn't care at all. They wanted the shows and stuff in the basement, and I did too. I was playing in bands and booking shows, but the art gallery was way more interesting to me because I could do whatever I want, and it was huge to me. So, okay, I'm going all out of order. I should have brought those notes. This is also around the time I started making posters. I started screen printing again. I had learned it in high school. Like a very rudimentary T-shirt printing workshop in high school. And so I hadn't touched it in years, but when I moved back to Logan Square and started to ebb back to the weirder part of my leanings, I started printing again because friends of mine were playing shows and they needed posters, and I was always drawing, so then eventually they started having other people print them, and I was like, well, I could remember how to do this. So slowly, I started to get back into it, and when we moved into people projects, then I had all these shows to do them for, which was great because I was the art director, illustrator, and printer all in one. So the Power of Two Fest was a show that I put on 2 years in a row where it was all two-piece bands, and they all had to fight, essentially. They would set up across from each other and play a set, and then when it was over, it was decided by audience participation who won the set. So it was like a battle set, and we did this whole day thing. This was for a show elsewhere, Aviary, which is probably now, I don't know, an app office or something. But it was on Fulton, and they had all kinds of crazy shows back then. And this was when people started to hire me for posters, slowly but surely. But I was still learning again how to do this, and I was really bad at it. So I would print 50 posters and I'd get 25 that were useful. This was a time when people started to pay me to do this, and then they would be like, "There's like 5 less posters in here than we were supposed to have," and I'd be like, "Well, that's unfortunate." And I ruined the rest of them. So slowly, I started to kind of figure it out again. But yeah, I had my little print shop was in the basement behind where the bands played. So I had this little weird subterranean print shop, and every once in a while a rat would run through my legs while I was printing, and I would think, isn't it great to be alive? Yeah, okay, this is to that effect. The rats would come up into our kitchen and steal things from us. Even though I built a wood door that closed the basement, they would chew through the wood door, come in. I found this ramen rat teepee, and they would pull loaves of bread off the top of the refrigerator. So, and then this is a pipe. This was my print shop back here. I never took a single photo of my print shop there, which I'm so mad about, but it's because there wasn't a camera on my cell phone, and I didn't think to document my subterranean, awful print studio. And all that graffiti was there when we moved in. I don't know what happened. I think like there was an anarchist collective that lived there in the late 90s or something, and it had just been there since then. But so this was my glamorous studio area. And sometimes at shows, I would wander back there and find people making out or throwing up near my print setup. Okay, this was one of the first things that I did with my gallery. Because all of a sudden I had 20 feet of space, so why not? Also, this was my bedroom. That is my bedroom. In the next slide, you see it here. This is my bedroom. You go up a ladder to the bed. Underneath is that. There's the moped. Actually, it's in there. The moped is parked in my bedroom. Also, to the left here, which you may have noticed, is me on a GoPed jumping a VHS copy of Major League. And this was the kind of stuff we were doing at this building because 2 doors over there was a moped shop, which is where I met Brad and a lot of these people. And we were just always doing nonsense in the alley because it was like a weird clubhouse that we were all living in these or working and living in storefronts, and like it was a weird little commune, a very strange time to be on Milwaukee Avenue over there. But anyway, the first thing I think, well, we had a couple of shows. The first thing I did in the gallery was build a full-size half pipe, and that was it. And it was called Ramp. And there was like an artist statement in the window that just said Ramp, and then it explained this is a piece of sculpture, and if the doors are open, you can use it. And we would skateboard in here, and somehow we did not shatter any of the windows in the front. But this was the first thing, and this sort of set the tone, and it was really fun to get to do this and to see people walk past, because, that stretch of Milwaukee is still sort of weird, but back then it was just, it was furniture store, shoe store, and then a half pipe. And they're like, so little old ladies in the neighborhood would stop and just watch us skateboard until we got hurt, somebody fell down, and then they would look at us with disgust that we hurt ourselves and walk away. So that was the first thing. Then I made a full-size 1-to-1 scale Porsche 911 out of paper mache. Because I had the space, why not? So I thought it would be really funny, especially because of what I was just saying about the neighborhood. If you're walking by a shoe store, furniture store, mattress store, furniture store, and then there is a somewhat mushy-looking Porsche 911 that is full automobile size parked in this thing. And then I painted the lettering is so cringy now to me, but I sat on a ladder and painted all these adjectives that would describe a Porsche owner to make it look like a dealership or something. But yeah, that was a fun one. I really wanted to, after it was done, I really wanted to leave it somewhere just to park it. I wanted so bad to bring it and park it on the street, like in front of the MCA, and just have somebody put tickets on it. But I couldn't get it out the door. The door wasn't big enough to get it out, so I had to cut it apart. This was a show that I did with a friend of mine called No War. This was during the Iraq War, and the whole thing was like no war is a phrase, but we made these cardboard TVs, and the whole idea was supposed to be that it's a distraction from everything. But the thing is, if you went into the gallery and look in the little gaps in between the TVs, behind it there was a flag draped casket that was just alone in the room. So it was kind of a cool use of the space for that, because you didn't really get it, when we were open. You could come in and actually like figure out what it was all about. But it wasn't all stuff that I did. We had one show that was really cool where I came across this outsider artist who had a booth at the Bucktown Arts Fair. I came over there on my bike at one point, and the Bucktown Arts Fair, it's mostly like paintings of the skyline and cats and whatever. It was all fine. And then I came into this guy's booth, and I was like, what is this? And it was an older schizophrenic man named Ed oh, Jesus. I knew I was going to blank. Ed Karcher? We're going to have to edit over this in the video. Kardaz. Jesus. Polish. Ed Kardaz. And he was making these super crazy paintings. They were all on paper or cardboard and stuff like that. And he was there with a friend of his who was sort of like representing him or like, helping him sell this stuff. And I got his info because I was really interested in it. And he lived in Bucktown, not very far from where we were at all. And I got to meet him. And then I told him I wanted to have a show of his stuff. So we hung a huge show of all this crazy stuff that he did, like portraits, landscapes, all these paintings. They were amazing. And he came, we had an opening. There was a ton of people came out. It was in the Reader. Like, I got him press, and like, he loved it. He was so, like, he had never had a show before, and we showed all this stuff. And it was like this super fun night, like one of those nights that just comes together perfectly, and it just went exactly the way. And he sold a bunch of work, and it was awesome. And 2 weeks before the show came down, he died. And his brother, who owned the building he lived in, came by, and he just said, if you want any of his work, you can have it. So I went over to his house, which I had never been to, and his entire downstairs. He had painted the walls, the ceiling, everything was painted, and there were paintings under couches, painting under beds, all this stuff. And his brother was like, I'm going to throw this away if you don't want it. So I took almost all of it, and I still have it. And like, the aim is to get all of it photographed at some point and make a book out of it. But it was a really cool, it was just like a crazy thing to find this guy, give him a show, and then he passes away, and then all of a sudden his brother gives me all of his stuff. So that was like a crazy thing that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have this space. But his work is beautiful, and he was a very interesting person. He was a veteran, and he was an embalmer at a funeral home. Like, he's a very, very interesting person, and I now have all of his life's work in boxes and sleeves, like in my basement. But yeah, that was one of them. And then this was the last thing I did before we moved out, and this was this was a show where I walked up and down Milwaukee Avenue between California and Western, and I picked up every piece of litter that I found and put it in a bag. And I did it on a semi-weekly basis for a month, and I hung every piece of litter in 2 enormous rectangles in the gallery, and holy shit, it smelled terrible. I should mention it was August, but it was like we were moving out in 2008, we were moving out, and I knew it, and I wanted to do one last thing, and I figured it would be something very specific to the neighborhood, sort of to just show how much of this crap. Milwaukee Avenue, there's garbage cans on every block, but still just blowing around. That was like, I'd never lived on a major street that way where you see that kind of stuff, and there was just trash everywhere. So I picked it all up and put it on the wall. And then after we moved out, I took it all down and recycled what I could and threw away the rest of it. But it was a very interesting looking 2 rectangles, but it smelled terrible. I think my roommates were not super happy about that one. Okay, turning point. So, 2008, I'm moving out of that space, and I move in with a girlfriend of mine, and I think, all right, that was interesting, that was weird. I like having a bathroom that less than 200 people used this week, so I'll live in this apartment, and I'm going to apply to grad school because I don't know, I'm working these design jobs and they're fine, but I think I want to be an artist. I just had this art gallery. I want to be a fine artist, so I'm going to apply to grad school, go to grad school, and then I can teach, I can do whatever. So that's the turning point back to normalcy. Just kidding. I got roundly rejected by every grad school I applied to. UIC even sent me 2 rejection letters on 2 separate days just to make sure. Okay. So I'm not going to go on that normal track and go back to college and be that. So what should I do? I'm going to start a skateboard company. So I grew up skateboarding. I love skateboarding. I always wanted to design a skateboard. So I figured the only way I could do that is if I just paid for it to get made myself. And the thing about skateboard art is you can do whatever you want, and the crazier or stupider you go with it, the more it's rewarded. So we had some things that have aged poorly, but a lot of it was basically sort of modeled after this shitbag beer drinking society that we were the skateboard company for the grown men children of the world who were caught in adolescence. And since I didn't get into grad school, why not just sit in that for a while? But yeah, it was super fun. This was our contact page on our website, if that's any indication of the sort of thing that we had going. But it was super fun, and Nick, who's here, was a big part of that. This is when we lived together, and we made all these skateboards, and I essentially paid for the first run, and then we'd sell the second run, and then that would pay for the third run. Third run would pay for the fourth run, and we'd just make more skateboards. It was essentially a non-profit without the tax bracket. Again, if you're paying attention, I'm making a project for myself that nobody told me I had to do. So I made skateboards for years, and we did this, and it was super fun. I met a lot of people, a lot of artists, a lot of young people that way. I was selling them out of our apartment like a drug dealer. Like, I'm sure our neighbors probably, there were just weird kids coming to the house at all hours but they were leaving with a skateboard under their arm. This is Tim. Tim skated. He was on the pro team for Hated, to give you an idea of what was going on with Hated. Also, at this time, I was in a band called Loose Dudes with Nick as well. We had a little bit of a artist co-op going. It's similar art direction to the skateboard company. We started a punk band. There were 4 of us, and we made a couple of records, and we were playing shows, and I was sort of leaning into the shit bag sort of a thing, playing shows. It was super fun, playing house shows all the time, and I even bought this terrible, shitty car to go with everything. Chappie was her name, and she was a wonderful car until the wheels started to slide off the back axle, probably because we did stuff like this to it. But yeah, this was sort of that era of my life. It was like didn't post people projects, didn't get into grad school, so started another band, do the skateboard company for a while, and that was sort of like what was going on then. Turning point 2, I don't know. I didn't number them. 2010, this turning point was not a good turning point. In 2010, my dad had a massive stroke. He was in the hospital for a very long time, and he lost the use of his entire right side, which was his dominant side. And this was a huge wake-up call in terms of just, this shit doesn't last forever, and don't do stuff that you don't need to be doing or don't want to be doing more so. Because my dad was a roofer, but he was an artist, and he loved to make art, and he always kind of put it on the back burner. And I think I kind of always sort of felt that my sister and I came along, and that didn't happen. So when this happened to him, it aged me 10 years in 1 month. Like, it was responsibility day after day, and just like being there for my mom, doing family stuff, very serious time, like no time for friends, anything. And that was like a big turning point back to focus, like, just if there's anything that you want to do it, or set plans to do it. So that was a time too where I was getting more into making posters. Like, I had been doing it this whole time, but a lot of it was for my own bands and friends' bands. But this was a period of time where, in addition to working full time, because I was working for a design company, publishing company that made custom publishing, like trade magazines and that kind of stuff. So I was working full time doing that. But I was focusing more on posters, and I was taking as much work as I could. I was taking on any poster anybody would give me, to the point of just working nights and weekends all the time, maybe as a coping mechanism, but also just, I love doing it, and I still do. And this was a time where I was getting better at printing, slowly but surely. But I would take on whatever anybody gave me. I would make the poster. A lot of animals in this period of time. I got to do a poster for Henry Rollins in this period, which was really cool. Very unexpected, but that was fun. It was becoming more of my thing, and instead of just all kinds of art. And then I did posters for my band, and I'm in a band, and I do this and all that. This is the period of time I think that I started to become like more of a poster artist, and that's what people knew me as. Just slowly but surely figuring it out. These are a little more recent than those. And then this is a set of 3 that I did last year for these shows with Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile. Sturgill Simpson, that was last year. So these are a little more recent. And then those 2. This was a job that came along via posters for Sub Pop, which was like probably my dream job, where the art director of Sub Pop emailed me and asked if I wanted to design barf bags for them. So I made these 3 illustrations, and they turned them into barf bags that they still sell because there's a Sub Pop record store in the SeaTac airport in Seattle. They have a record store, so they figured, why not sell barf bags at the record store? So I got to design, and then they made these barf bags. Oh, another turning point. All right. I'm not going to embarrass her too much, but this 2013, I met my partner, Elizabeth, and this was a point where I started to, well, not only get better at printing, because Elizabeth is a way better printer than I am, I started to figure out more about working in this world and just sort of working for myself, sort of. So this was a perfect time to meet her and start dating her, and like learn from her in terms of screen printing. But also, I was just getting so much work, which at this point it doesn't seem like it was that much, but it was a lot. I was working full time on top of it, and that's when I decided, well, this is great. I just met this screen printer. I'm getting a ton of poster work. I'm getting a lot of weird illustration jobs and stuff like that. So it's time to quit my job. So in 2013, I quit my job and went full-time freelance, and I have been ever since then with my expensive, terrible insurance. And so in this time, I started to work in these series, again, creating a weird little project for myself to do that I didn't have to. But I thought the first year of being self-employed, I was a little afraid that there were going to be gaps in work. So I sort of built in this series that I would do. So if I had a very slow week, I would at least be working on something, and then I would sell these online. It was slightly ambitious. I ended up doing a poster every week for a year. So I made 52 screen prints that year, on top of whatever else I was doing for people for money. So this was the first thing I did. It was a print every week. And sometimes it corresponded to the week of the year. Sometimes it corresponded to what I was working on. If I was doing a concert poster, maybe I would just tape off the band names and make a small edition of art prints of that to be my poster of the week. But either way, I made all these posters that year, 2014. And it was a challenge for sure, but I liked the regularity of it, and I liked working in a series. So one of these was a print here that was called Autumn on the Farm with Shitting Dog. So it was an autumn scene of a farm, and there's a dog taking a dump in the foreground. And I kind of liked that one because it was painterly, and it was in a style that I had not really worked in for screen printing. So the next series was the 2015 Treasury of Shitting Dogs, where every single print was one of these, and I scaled it back ever so slightly to just once a month. So I did 12 of them, but it was these scenes of American life, but somewhere in the image there's a dog pooping, and I really like these because. And I've since come back to this. I just ended another year of these because they're super fun because it's really fun. That's me. This is the last one of the first series, so that was me painting the scene. But it's fun to make a beautiful picture and ruin it. Like to be fully in charge of just that. Like I can make this pretty thing and then ruin it. And it's also funny because some of them are more subtle, so I like the idea that it would hang in somebody's house and maybe somebody would walk past it 2 or 3 times before they realized there was a dog taking a dump in it. I like to make things that have a little payoff, a visual payoff if you actually pay attention to it. Some of them are more obvious than others, though. So after a year of that, also, these ended up becoming skateboard art. This all sewed together where finally, after running a skateboard company, I made this series just for myself, and then a real skateboard company asked if they could use 4 of them for their pro models. So it was amazing to get that email. So yeah, four of the first series ended up becoming pro model skateboards for a company that I liked and knew. So yeah. So then the next series I worked on was these were all images of weird little hole-in-the-wall restaurants or hot dog places around Chicago. And this is sort of a period where I started to get a lot more enamored with drawing buildings, drawing just general Chicago. The way Chicago looks is a huge thing in my work, and it comes up a lot. So I love to draw buildings essentially. And my dad used to draw buildings all the time, and like that was part of his job a little bit. And I think part of that sort of trickled down. I love it. It's just like something about it, even if it's repetitive with shingles or bricks or things like that. But so this was another. I did 12 of these throughout the year after that. And then after that, the series, like I said, I did another shitting dog series that just ended, and there's going to be a show of all 12 of them next Saturday. So this is just some recent work that I did this year, just to bring it sort of up to speed. I did this art with Bullet early in the year that they used for posters. They're really into this fraudage thing where you rub on the bottle, so that you got to rub on the bottle, and then then it gets incorporated into whatever you want, and then they use it. And they made these like large outdoor murals with a handful of artist series ones. But I tried to like sort of make it an homage to Chicago in a way. And then Pipeworks, which is here, and many of you are holding. So yeah, this was awesome. This is like, yeah, I mean, to get to work for beer companies is like perfect in my aesthetic. I'm working on stuff for a bowling alley right now, and then like bowling alley beer, like this is like Chicago, very Chicago. So it's fun and like when they came to me with this, it was like we want it to look like old American beer cans, like 70s steel beer cans, and I was like, I have like 300 of those in my garage, so because my uncle collected them in the 70s and gave me his whole collection, so it was a very easy yes on this one. And then we made a screen print out of it. Elizabeth printed these. This is like a 9-color or 10-color screen print that we did of the label art, which is super cool, like working away from posters and then ending up going back to it. These are just a couple more labels I ended up doing, the Oktoberfest, and then this is the Hells that some of you have been drinking. Yeah.
Were you tempted to put a shitting dog on?
Well, the thing is now, every time I post stuff on Instagram that's just like a nice scene, there's always one guy who's like, hey, where's the shitting dog? And I mean, he's got a good question, but sometimes it's just not in the cards. I would love, if I could do a beer label that had a picture of a dog taking a dump, like, I don't know how appetizing that is to people, but I would drink that beer. And this was this year too. The Chicago Bears came out of the woodwork and asked me to do a set of stickers. They were doing other artists too, so it wasn't just me, but they asked for a set of 5 stickers that they were just going to make and then give away. They were going to put them places with a street team or something. I was very busy that week. There was a lot going on, and it was a fast turnaround, but they were like, you can do whatever you want. And I was like, I can do whatever I want, like whatever I want. And they were like, yeah, no edits. I was like, yeah, no edits, right. So I sent this to them, and I was like, okay, they're for sure going to come back and be like, the bear in the Shriner car is not going to fly. But they didn't. They came back, they only had one edit. The truck was a different color in the first round, and it was yellow, and green and yellow are no-go with the Bears. So I figured it was like a pale enough shade of yellow, but it still didn't fly. So that was a weird one to come out of the woodwork, like super fun, but unexpected. And then these are some more recent posters. As I'm reaching my, 12th, 13th year making posters now, I'm getting to work for more bands that are a little more visible, and it's cool, it's fun. I still love doing stuff for my friends and for local bands, but it's cool to do stuff that really gets seen. So this was, Superchunk was earlier in the year, and then Courtney Barnett at Pitchfork. This was John Prine. I've gotten to do a ton of work for John Prine, which was a surprise to me, but I'm more than happy that they like what I do. And they love when I play to the stuff that I like anyway, which is scrap trucks, hot dog restaurants, and Chicago buildings. So this is a 3 for 3. Sold out very fast at the show, apparently, so I did my job on that one. And then Leon Bridges was another one that was a cool surprise to get. Billy Strings is an artist who is more on the countryside, and I've been getting approached by more of that sort of thing, which is interesting. I think aesthetically, it's fun to work for that. And again, all these shows were in Colorado. This just happened. And there's a strip on Colfax in Denver that has these incredible old hotels. So I just used that and sort of made this impossible view of the 3 ones that I liked. And then most recently, I've gotten to do some work for Childish Gambino, which was an honor and really exciting and fun to do. This was for a show that actually got canceled because he got injured. So this show never happened, but they're on their redo tour right now, and they asked me to do the Oakland show next week. So no photos, this isn't out yet. But this was a super fun, probably the biggest show poster I've ever done, for sure. So super fun to get to do work like that. And the newest thing is Elizabeth and I are opening a gallery and print shop, finally. We've been looking forever for a place, because I still work out of my house. I've been wanting to separate that for a long time, and we found a space, and we're opening a place where I'm gonna get to do like people projects again, but less people throwing up in the bathroom. I don't have to sleep there. And we don't have a basement that's going to flood, and it's going to be legal, and the cops will probably won't come. And yeah, it's so yeah. If you're interested in what we're up to going forward, that show of the new dog series is going to be at Paper Hat. It's going to be our first show next Saturday. So if you're interested in seeing them in person, or yeah, they're nice to look at in person. Everything's on a phone now, and you see it this big, but screen prints are so much nicer to look at in person, where you can see the layers and everything. So with that, I'm pretty sure I'm done. This is my turn. This is the turning point for 2048 when I retire. I found this photo of an old man drinking a Hamm's that looks kind of like I will I hope I will when I'm 65. So with that, thank you very much for sitting through this. And if you have any questions, now's the time. Yes, Nick, confidant, friend.
When you're doing auditions for someone like that Childish Gambino, that's like an arena show? Are you
Yeah.
crazy numbers?
Surprisingly, no. This is where Elizabeth comes into the organization, because I print by hand and Elizabeth has a semi-automatic press, so she's able to print huge editions with speed and accuracy. So when we have bigger runs, she always prints them. But the Childish Gambino thing, they set an artificially low amount of posters with the intention of selling them out at the show. So Oracle Arena, where that show is happening next week, the capacity is 20,000, and they only made 165 posters, which is great, because then the rest of those people can find me on the internet, and I'll sell the 20 that I have. But yeah, they set it very low to ensure they just fly at the show. But that's absurdly low, because usually for shows much smaller than that, we would usually do 300 or more. But yeah, they set it kind of low to move them. Any other questions? Yes.
What plans do you have for Paper Hat?
Well, it's going to function as our day-to-day studio. We're going to work there. We're moving the print setup there, but the main thing is we'll have a small part of it is going to be a gallery, so we'll get to do shows and host shows and weird little events and that kind of stuff. And also we're going to start teaching workshops, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, where if somebody, sometimes at events or things like this, people will come up to me and ask, like, where can you learn to screen print, if not in a college, or if not in a situation where you need to rent space month to month or something. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna provide space we're gonna provide workshops where people can come in and learn the basics of it. And I'm kind of excited for that aspect, to teach people how to do it and how to do it in their apartment if they want, because that's how I did it forever and ever. And it is the one medium you can do it at home, where you don't need chemicals or a giant machine or anything like that. You just have to ruin your bathtub and then clean it when you move out. I ruined a lot of bathtubs in my days. I spent a whole day cleaning the bathtub on like move out day, every apartment I've ever had. Because I never had pressure washers. When I was doing these posters, up until the place we're living in now, I didn't have pressure washer or anything like that. So I'd just clean it in the bathroom, and then I would make a pile of them that eventually, when I had no screens to use, I would put in my car, drive to the car wash, put $1 in it, and blast all the screens out in the car wash. Regardless, which was, in December, not fun. And it's funny because I would go to the car wash probably at least once a week, and I never washed my car once in those years. I would drive to the car wash every week and never washed my car. Any other questions? Yes, Brad.
Without getting too far into like process and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you, when you're doing like the shitting dog, so there's lots of colors involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you starting with an actual painting that you're doing on paper, or are you going straight to the?
Well, so I'm realizing now I'm not repeating the questions either, which I was supposed to. So the question was, when I make the dog prints that are very colorful and layered, do I start with a painting, or how do I start with that? And the answer is no. A lot of these, for the longest time, I've started to use outputted Photoshop layer films lately, but for the longest time I made all my films by hand. So, and I still do for those ones. So every layer of that is just black. And so I'm seeing black, and then I'll put a film on top of that, and it's black, and a film on that, and it's black, and I have to see the colors working backwards. So I start off with an image. I usually like sort of Photoshop an image. I'll find like sort of a scene that I like, but then I'll alter that, and then I'll add the dog, and I'll add a building or whatever I need to, and then I'll start with that as a framework, and then I basically paint on top of it, and I'll paint layer by layer, just black, all black, and I'll start to print maybe halfway through it when I'm not even done to start to see how the colors are building, and then if I have to fix stuff at the end, I'll add it into that film. But yeah, those are all no computer. I mean, I Photoshop scenes sometimes to get started, but I don't make the films in Photoshop at all. So I don't ever see those full color until they're done. Yeah, which is how I did these posters forever. I started off doing it, and I didn't have my own computer when I started. I was working at these publishing companies, and they would give me these brand new Macs, and they were fantastic. I didn't own a computer at home, and I didn't have a phone that had the internet on it. So if you can even believe, I would go home and I wouldn't see the internet or my email for the whole day, and then I'd go in the next day and I would check my personal email at work. It's almost unfathomable at this point. But yeah, I didn't even have a computer, let alone a printer, so I figured out I could make these films by hand if I drew the image first and then I would just buy rolls of acetate, roll it over it, and then I would draw on it with paint markers, or I would paint onto it with a water-based sign painting enamel. And I still use that. Nowadays, I have to show more put-together comps to bigger artists and stuff like that. So a lot of the time now, it gets hand-drawn and then scanned in, and then I do the color work in Photoshop. But still, though, the art prints, and when I get to kind of have my way and just work quick, I make films by hand, just all in black, and then I don't see the color comp until it's done, until it's a real thing. Any other questions? Great. I could use another beer. Thank you so much for coming.